that too. Yeah. We got 2 mics going here.
Oh, wow.
Squeeze my ass in right here.
Whoa. We're in there.
Whoa.
We are definitely...
We're in. What's up, everybody? Nick with Velox Training Group, and today I've got Joe Farewell and Fabio Spinella, and I feel like we're going to have a really good conversation here about training. Hopefully this is entertaining for you guys and you get something out of it. As always, at the end, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box below. We're always happy to answer all this stuff.
You don't have to wait till the end either. You can do it now or in the middle.
You should do it right now.
Whenever you feel like it, that's fine.
Whenever. Don't let Nick tell you what to do. You can do it whenever you want to drop a comment.
Yes, for sure. You're not my real dad. All right, so I feel like it would be a good conversation if we talked about movement stuff. So let's talk about entries, exits. I feel like this would be a good conversation, yeah? So let's talk about what would be some key principles of entering into a position.
I think that anytime that you're entering into a position, the most important thing is, or the focus of your entry should be, how do we get stable enough inside a shooting position to take an accurate shot?
Okay.
That's, to me, when I look at an entry, that's the goal, right? Point A to point B. As we're coming into point B, how do we get into that shooting position in a orientation to the target that we can take an accurate shot and get stable sooner? So one of the things that we see a lot teaching, or at least I see a lot teaching, is the first rule of movement that I see most people failing on with entry is not having the gun up, right? So
Sure.
that's the easiest thing that people can correct when they're working on getting better entries is have the gun up and ready to shoot by the time you get into the shooting position. Mm-hmm. If you wait on that, you're behind the clock. Mm-hmm. As we get past that, then we can refine it more and more. And okay, now we start talking about footwork. We start talking about how do we get balance? Are we crashing into position? Are we slowing down too soon?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different things that I'm excited to talk about.
I'll actually double down on that. Like, so the gun up sooner. Like, yeah, we've been hearing about that for like years. Yeah, you got to get the gun up sooner. I think there's something in the gun up sooner that informs your feet as to what they need to do. So that's what I mean by that. Yeah. Like, sometimes people will put up the gun up sooner because they've been told to do that, and they'll see stability way before they're in the shooting area. Okay, that's too soon. So the gun up sooner is giving your eyes are giving your feet information like, yep, you definitely did it too soon. Or sometimes the gun up, and then you see a crap ton of movement in there, that should inform your feet that maybe they need to quiet down a little bit so you can actually shoot when you get into that position. So gun up sooner, not just because somebody told you so, but gun up sooner so that you can inform your feet as to, like, if you did it too soon, if you have reached stability too soon or reached stability too late. I feel like balancing that, syncing that up correctly is going to be the best way to, like, okay, I pushed as far as I could. Now I got to get a stability for that last, whatever that is, 10% of the movement, 20% of the movement. So gun up sooner, use that as information. If you're like actually pre-aiming through, you know, like people talk about tracking the A zone or whatever you want to talk about, like actually pre-aiming before you have the target, maybe it's through a visual barrier. That pre-aiming also has the gun up, also has some sighting system in there, and that should inform your feet. And it's like a subconscious thing. If you do it enough times, you're like, yep, I'm seeing a disaster up here. Yep, my feet need to quiet down. Or I'm not even there yet, and I see like perfect still sights. Like, crap, I did it too soon. So gun up for a reason, not gun up because some world champion told you to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is good. I like this. What is So we hear gun up, right? Step softly. What does an entry look like in terms of what you're doing with your feet? Because I feel like a lot of the time we talk about where to place one foot, but I feel like all of us would agree that like your feet kind of need to be in a certain orientation to create a good entry. I'll leave it at that and let you guys.
So I think this one is one you and I have had some interesting
that's
conversations.
That's why I think it's going to be good.
Nick and I have some differing points of view on this a little bit. And the fun thing about this is we nerd out about it. So instead of just saying, hey, this is the way I do it because this is the way I do it, Nick has a different entry method than I do, and I went and put it on, for me, I put it on the clock. I did it, I think, 20-something times one way and 20-something times another his way, and found, data-based that I like mine better. Now, a lot of that comes down to which ones you're more comfortable with, and being honest with what you're actually doing, because we all have our personal biases, especially at this point. But then what I would love to do at some point is take somebody who's doesn't have a bias either way, or take a group of people who don't have a bias either way and split half of them and do them either way, or do them both ways and see which one comes out on top. But for me, what I like to do is if I'm moving on a lateral plane, so left to right or right to left, I like to come in and I will try to plant my outside foot. So if I'm moving left to right, that would be my right foot. As I come into a position, I like to plant my outside foot in the shooting area and then bring my left foot in, my inside foot, into the shooting area and settle. And it allows me to get behind the gun. As that right foot plants, the left foot kind of comes in and just steps. Now, there's definitely...
your classic three-step entry.
It's a three-step entry, right? Which I think, realistically, most entries are... I don't like to count steps. I think that's a kind of funny thing.
Dude,
but yes,
I agree. I'm glad you said that.
A three-step entry, yes.
Yeah.
Because
so you essentially have a
feel
traditional like break step before the entry, then you have
before
your
the shooting
lead
area.
foot goes into the area, and then your trail foot joins it.
Correct.
But you may be shooting even before the trail foot joins it.
Exactly.
I'm glad you said, like, because I feel like I do a three-step entry. I'm just entering in with a different foot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still have a break foot. Again, I'm
Yeah.
this is great. I'm like in the middle. You still have a break foot.
Yeah,
You still have
100%.
an entry foot, and then you still have a settle foot.
Yes.
It's just they're different from each other. You enter with your trail foot. You
Yep.
enter with your lead foot.
Correct. So,
Cool. I love this. This is great. Keep going. Where else are we going on there?
So what I find is that it allows my dot to settle as my trail foot is coming in and settling into the target. And I can start shooting earlier versus breaking in position. Now, I had a great conversation with Jake from Inextremis Performance.
Sorry, Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Had a great conversation with him today about this very topic, and he had because he's a true like biomechanic coach, right? Body coach, human performance coach, I think is what he calls it. But he was talking about how your way is faster. From a human performance standpoint, it is faster. From point A to point B, it is a quicker method.
Yep.
However, he can, see, and this is what I saw in my own testing, my own reps on it, he could see where the way that we're breaking into a position allows that dot to not be as wild, not to be as loud, right? Not to be bouncing around as much as you're stopping. And a lot of that comes down to how we're coming into position. But then the other thing we have to think about is, are we exiting? How are we exiting? How are we setting up for that exit?
Yep.
And that comes into play too. And one thing that I'll say as a disclaimer for everybody, you can plan your footwork on your entries as hard as you want to plan them. Yeah. However, in the middle of a match, your footwork, your foot placement may not line up perfectly. So you need to be comfortable and understand that the foundation of what our goal is for an entry is to enter softly and to shoot soon.
Right, you're concept based rather than like technique based, which is totally cool. Now that being said, I think it is important to have maybe multiple techniques to enter a position or exit a position, because then you have the body mechanics of being able to do either or whatever is applicable. And sometimes it's the distance between the first position and the second position that might dictate that. Otherwise, you're doing choreography to set up just the right thing. And it's like, okay, that choreography is going to cost you time because you have to set up your feet and you have like 6,000 shuffle steps to make it right. So you're right. It's sometimes, like, if you prefer doing a three-step entry, you'll probably end up doing more of those just because your body moves that way.
Right.
If you're doing a trail foot entry, you might do more of those because your body moves that way. But I think it would be a mistake to go, I'm a trail foot entry guy, or I'm a three-step entry guy. I need to be able to be good at both. In fact, in my movement classes, we talk about be good at multiple things and figure out, like, because in that moment you might plan this, that, and the other because the difficulty of the target dictates that I need more stability, therefore maybe like my hips oriented towards the target is better, like a three-step entry.
Yep.
But then I'm in the heat of the moment, maybe I'm running more full speed than I would have in the run through, and I find myself with the trail foot entry, so I don't have to do 14 stutter steps to get it right, and maybe my hips aren't perfectly aligned that way, and I still need to be able to conceptually be able to like put my gun up early, see what I need to see for that target, whatever. So yes and yes. So like I don't know that
Yeah.
there's like a real
So-
solution other than like
well-
if you just omit like, yep, I only do this. It's like, why
Yeah,
are you
right.
only doing that? And maybe nobody's that extreme, but I think a lot of people would like sit in a camp instead of like working all the things out. It's like, well, I studied under this person and this person would only do this, so that I have to. It's almost like forcing a round peg in a square hole. It's
Yeah.
like, I think it's better to know more things and then allowing your body to get you there, because conceptually, what does movement do? I need to go from A, which is the beginning of the stage, to B, which is the end of the stage, right? With all the stops in between,
Yep.
and never stop collecting points, hopefully. All the quiet times of me not shooting is because my movement did not allow me to see the next survey or the next target.
That's good.
So I'm violating that rule. Like if my rule in movement is I start at the beginning and the last target is only visible here. How do I get from there to there and I never stop shooting?
Yeah.
That's the concept that I'm not trying to violate. Not like I don't want to violate my 3-step entry. It's like
and
three-step
one-
entry might help me body mechanics
Yeah.
wise to point my hips towards the target and I see the thing. But if I can stick a trail foot entry and be just as you know, what's the word? Not accurate, but like effective or efficient, it might work the same. So I would say like let's do all of those things,
Well,
not just some of those things.
Truth be told, like the difference between the two techniques that Nick and I talked about, like I averaged on all the reps that I did, I averaged a 1/10 of a second faster on mine. Average.
That's pretty good though. Like
Which
if
is-
you do that 4 entries, that's like a half a second, 5 entries. You know,
right.
like
So
that's
for a
good.
short stage, it's pretty
Yeah.
pretty significant.
Yeah,
He found the opposite,
sure.
and a lot of that I think is comfort level.
Yeah, what you do
yes.
the most of, right?
But
For
one
sure.
thing you brought up in that conversation was on your, designing your choreography, and this is one thing that I really like to do, and I encourage you guys if you're doing your walkthrough, try to get a full speed walkthrough at the speed that you anticipate moving and shooting on the stage, and it's tough to do sometimes because you
The
have
conga line.
six people in
Yeah.
line in front of you.
Yeah.
But I will stand there and hold up the line and wait until, hey, this is a tough footwork position. I know I need to nail this entry.
Especially very tight
Yeah.
footwork. Yep.
Yeah.
I know I need to nail this entry, so I'm going to wait until everyone clears out of the way, and I'm going to try to do this at the speed that I anticipate doing it, and you will learn so much from that because, like, oh crap, I was anticipating shooting out on this target, and then sprinting 6 steps to this one, and then you're shooting out on that target. Now took you 3/4 of the way there, and instead of sprinting, you're suddenly crashing into the position.
Or a malfunction, or
Right.
I don't know, a reload that took a little longer than you thought, or something like that. So planning perfectly for something doesn't always work out. I mean,
Yep.
it's nice to
But
have
doing-
a great good visualization and a walkthrough, but
Doing a good full speed walkthrough if possible, and sometimes it's when you're on deck, you're the last, you're the next shooter up. You have to take that opportunity to do it. Getting a full speed walkthrough of your footwork at the speed that you anticipate doing it, I found is super helpful for me, especially when you have alternative terrain, is what I like to mud,
Yeah.
slick grass, gravel, stuff like that. Instead of your traditional range surface, if you have anything like that that's going to change the footwork for it, your 90-10 shift or anything like that, try to get a full speed entry, especially if it's a hard lean or something like that.
yeah, it's super tough because sometimes. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
I was thinking like
I
even like
have something. but
last
go ahead.
year's like both nationals for USPSA carry optics and IPSC nationals, like huge puddles, hard
Yeah.
to get any kind of real walkthrough. People were just like gingerly walking through, trying to find spots that would be appropriate enough so that you can see all the things, but nobody's running because I mean literally there was like inches and inches of water. So sometimes we don't have that
but then-
luxury, and then you go, okay, well, if I understand my body mechanics, how can I explode out of here? How can I get into that position and see all the things I need to see? Because again, the rules I don't want to violate is I need to get from beginning to end and never stop shooting, ideally, or
that.
collect as many points as possible.
Yeah.
So that's the main rule. Entries and exits only help you to achieve that rule,
Right.
instead of being married to like a pedagogy or a lineage of people or something like that. Yes, you wanted to say something.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So we've heard a lot about how you enter in a position. Yes, got to enter softly. I think all of us would agree with that.
Yeah.
Enter with the gun up. You just touched on turning the hips towards the target.
Yeah.
Right? Tell people more about turning the hips towards the target, and how would you land into a position? Like, what does it look like to land into a position? Because personally, I feel like turning the hips towards the target, yep, that's one thing. Like, yes, they have to be facing towards the target. Like, But the way I try to conceptualize that is as I'm coming into a position, as soon as I point the gun at the target, like the hips start turning towards the target. And that's why I think I differ on like which foot to enter first. But like the way that you enter into a position, I think one of the biggest things, it should set you up to get out of that position.
Sure.
And so one of the things that every time I try that typical like 3-step entry,
Your feet are narrow.
Yeah, they land narrow. And so I'm like, yeah, I can shoot like that, but it doesn't set me up to leave out of that position, which is what is holding me up on it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like target difficulty for me dictates more of what I need to have in my entry than some choreography or some like preconceived. I have to have 3 steps or I have.
What
to
does
have
it
2
look
steps.
like in terms of like your feet?
So and here's why. Because
I'm not trying to
like,
bait you into
ever,
what
you ever do like lateral movement across 4 or 5 targets, but you do lateral movement incorrect and your hips are facing the wrong way, and then you know that on the second shot you have to trail a little bit the gun. If you actually are connected to the target with your eyes, you know that your first shot goes off, and then your shoulders actually do a little bit of this if you're actually paying attention. Otherwise, you're going to paint one in the direction of travel.
Yes.
How often does that happen?
If you start
right?
turning
if
your
you
hips
actually do like
away from it.
traditional like more like law enforcement movement where your hips are facing that way, you're doing you're rolling your feet instead of like the crossover a little bit, which a little bit of like reach and cross, which is more like an Eric Raffel style of movement, lateral movement.
I call it leaving disrespectful. Right? Like
So
you completely
if you don't do that
disrespect it.
kind of
like-
lateral movement, which is the same thing as entering with your hips facing the target, you won't have as much flexibility in your shoulders to actually pace the second shot where you want it. Rather, like if you're moving that direction, your hips are facing that direction, the first one might be great, but then the second one may go in the direction of travel. If your hips are more open, then you have more availability of your upper body to actually pace the second one where you want it. I think of it more that way. It's like if this target is really target, maybe it's a tuxedo or something like that, I'm entering into that, I don't really want less flexibility in my upper body to be able to pace the second one where I want it. I don't want it to travel with me, so I might consider more of a hips towards the target because the target difficulty is higher. But when it's an open target, if it is faster for me to enter with a trail foot, who gives a rip? Like, how did I get into that position? How soon can I get in there and start shooting? If it's a 5-yard target in the entry and it's an open target, man, it almost does not matter how I enter with my feet. I just need to get into the position where my feet are in the available, like, legal area to shoot instead of like my hip. If it's a 20-yard tuxedo, it's like, man, I am going to have my hips towards that target because now the priority is different. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. One question on that. You said that bullets may track off the target if you turn your hips, right? Would you say that is a movement thing or a visual thing?
I
Because
think
in my experience, what I see is like if I hold my eyes on one spot, that's what locks the gun on the spot, rather than like anything.
I agree with you 100%. So if I lock my eyes on the camera right now, but my hips are facing this way, and I keep traveling, like how much more flexibility and room do I have? My body mechanics are not going to support that as much as if I am actually facing the camera, and then I have to trail more.
Now,
There's just more
are you
room,
talking
more
about an
flexibility.
entry or an exit there?
Entry too. Like if I'm traveling this way and I'm entering with a lot of like, I'm running full speed or whatever. If I have my hips towards the camera, I have more room with my upper body to move, as opposed to if I am facing completely this way and I enter with a trail foot, and I am having to pull my shoulders back to make sure the second shot doesn't keep going with me.
Yep.
So
I think that's how a lot of people enter with the trail foot, where they'll like, if they're going this direction, they're actually facing that direction when they enter, and then
Which
have
is what
to
you're
kick it all the way
doing.
around.
You're doing that.
But I'm not. See, I'm actually like as soon as I get the gun up,
we are.
as soon as I get the gun up and start looking at the target, the hips start turning.
They start to turn.
Yeah.
They start
But
to turn.
they're turning after you're already in position.
After your first
As
foot
soon
is in the
fully,
suit,
yes.
As soon as your first foot hits in, so if these are your hips, your first foot hits inside the position, you are now
Yes.
turning around and
Yes.
planting versus turning, planting. Now I can shoot because my hips are
Yes.
towards the target, and then
Yeah,
I
yeah.
settle. So it's a slightly different. It's a timing thing, right? It's just a different timing
Yeah.
thing.
So what I noticed, like doing the 3-step entry, right? Stomp, step, step. What I notice is as soon as that lead foot steps into the box, I have to load that foot to get the other foot into the box,
So you feel
and
like
then
you're
I
leaning-
end up doing
yeah.
like this, and I see a bunch of movement in the sights, and I think that's part of the reason why it was slower for me and less.
And
And
some
see,
of that is
it's not
also like,
inverse-
I guess
though,
you'd call it less accurate.
But inversely, as I come in and I plant inside the shooting area and swing this around, now my dot's on the target. This is all movement while I'm in the shooting area, and then this is an impact, even if it's a soft impact. And I got it soft just like you do.
Yep.
But as it settles down, that's still an impact of my right foot, my lead foot, settling into position, and I see a movement in my sights. And
Yeah.
what that resulted in is not just a slower time, but also I had more Charlies and Deltas and no shoots because I tested this on a pretty precise target. I tested to both directions with a partial with a no.
and
shoot
again,
front.
see, now we'll go back to like target dependent. The difficulty of the target is going to dictate how much your hips need to be facing that target in order to not drag on and off.
Yeah, you could be disrespectful on
Yeah.
several types of
You
targets.
could almost, and I hate this, and you don't do this. But you can almost jump into that position. If it's a 7-yard open target, who gives a rip? Just run full speed longer because you don't have to have very stable sides. Confirmation levels can be very low.
You can do your GM Superman exit and falling
Exactly.
out of position.
So again, you must, in my opinion, have multiple ways of entering, multiple
Yes.
ways of exiting, having like a book of body mechanics that you use. It's just like when you fight people. Like again, where do I get this from? It's all like when you're sparring somebody or you're fighting somebody, knowing how your body moves and where you can expect to like dodge and skip and like just getting away from punches while you're still throwing strikes. Like that's all body mechanic stuff that you have to figure out for yourself. Like how does my body move? How quickly can I bob and weave and all that stuff and still throw a strike? Same with having several ways of entering a position, several ways of exiting the position. That again serves the purpose of like I start here, I end here. I don't want to stop shooting the entire stage.
Yep.
How do I do that? And sometimes it's a very awkward entry, but at least you didn't have to take 14 stutter steps to get the choreography just right.
Right.
And sometimes it's a little bit of like I hate saying like sometimes a drop step, if you have a nasty lean, may be the best option,
100%.
even though
Might have
people
to be.
crucify the drop step. And in general, it's not the most efficient way to exit. But man, if you got
No,
like
there's-
significant amount of weight on one side of your body, like 60, 70% of your weight on like, and again, this is from testing this out for a lot of DPA matches where there's leans on every single time. Like you're like you have all those fault lines. It might be better to give a quick like jab step, not even call it.
And I
drop
won't even
step.
say it might be better. It is the better. There's certainly times.
So instead of eliminating
there's
everything,
there's two times that I will say that drop steps are absolutely efficient. I used to drop step like crazy. I was king of drop steps.
What is a drop step?
A drop step is when we take a step in the opposite direction to shift our weight,
Get the momentum.
to go in the direction we want to go. Yeah. And people do it all the time. I still catch myself doing it from time to time, but I used to be really bad until JJ sat there and beat me over the head with a stick. He was like,
Sure.
"Stop
And he's like completely
freaking
against
doing
it.
that!"
Yeah, I get it.
But
Is it a bamboo
there's two
stick?
times.
Oh, the Filipino stick. That's what we call it in fighting.
But there's two times that it's beneficial, and that's when you have a start position where if this is our fault line, you have toes touching or heels touching, you have to move forward.
That is, especially in IPSC when you can't have an athletic start. Like,
Correct.
you have to be like super
If you're
tall.
off
tough.
if you're off center, you go in, to the right. You can kind of lean into that. You can set yourself up to take an athletic start. IPSC, you can't take an athletic
can't.
start. So there is
Super awkward.
a benefit to doing a drop step right there because you're able to push off of that position. You
support that.
create
Yep.
a forward angle of the shins. Your
Yeah,
hips
like
are
a runner.
right there. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The other time is what you're talking about, where where you're leaned over a position, you leaned around the wall or barricade, and you've got your weight balanced on the right side of your body. You need to go left,
Yeah.
and I call it the molasses exit. If you don't drop step, you're going to do a molasses exit.
Yeah.
It looks like
you're gonna have to
it
go
looks like you're
through
stuck in
that
that
athletic
molasses
position. Yeah, you're like,
Yes.
and then you go. Yeah.
So
Totally.
Body mechanics are awful for that.